Hey, welcome to All Saints Church. My name is Bill Berger. It's good to be with you. Looking at or wanting to pay attention to not only the development of ourselves as a community, which we've been talking about, development of ourselves as a church, but we also have to talk about the development of ourselves as individuals. And so let me read this passage and right away here, and then we'll get going. So it'll sound familiar to you. If I speak in the tongues of men or of people or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. So did you recognize it? 5% off your tithe if you guessed it. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 8. And again, like I said, it's a very familiar passage. It's beautiful poetry, beautiful literature. And as you know, this passage is often read at weddings, and whenever it's read, the response from here is, oh, that's sweet. However, the writer of Corinthians, that wasn't the sentiment he was looking for. The Corinthians, when they first heard this and read it as a letter, they were not enamored with the text either. At the time, the city of Corinth, this is Corinthians, written to the Corinthian church, was one of the greatest cities in the world. It was a city where people would come to be successful. Nobody went there to have a settled life. People who lived there weren't from old families or traditions. It was a place where people came to get a resume, get wealthy, and be successful. Does that sound familiar? Maybe Seattle? It attracted resourceful, talented, ambitious, and intense people. And the church of Corinth reflected that population and the culture. The entire book of Corinthians was addressing the arguments and disputes that were going on in the church. And the writer, Paul, isn't sitting at his desk with a warm heart asking, you know what, I think I'm going to write about love. He's saying, look, you are an amazing, talented group of people. Your giftedness is great, but your character is coming up short. And it seems that there is an emphasis on being a professional and having really good business acumen. And possibly, Paul is saying, look, I don't care who you are in your private world. As a professional, you don't show that. What we want you to do is perform and be productive. Maybe that's the sentiment that Paul was speaking to. That people are looking at like, hey, live your life. It doesn't matter how you live your life behind closed doors. We just want you to be productive. And kind of feeling like that's what Paul is saying, look, that's wrong. We have to deal with that. I think this really speaks to our culture today. It speaks to us. It speaks to me. The text is saying, look, I don't care how rich, talented, successful, or smart you are. If you're irritable, self-absorbed, always right, angsty, and anxious, you're really missing something very critical, because character is everything. So what is character? Well, we could probably spend the rest of this time together talking about it, asking a lot of questions, and probably not agreeing on what we come up with. So what is the supernatural change in character that only God can bring? And I realize that in and of itself can be argued, that only God can bring about this character change, because we have YouTube videos, we have motivational speakers, we have books that talk about being a good person, being a person of character. But how does that change happen? Is it something that's transcendent? or is it something that's inside? That's what we're going to go after today. So let's look at verse 2 of our text and look at it this way. Heart character is not the same thing as being gifted. Verse 2, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And it's amazing that Paul uses that phrase, I am nothing, if I don't have love. And so breaking that down, faith that moves mountains, that's a leadership gift. What's leadership? Well, the ability to gather people to do something greater together than they could do individually. Kind of a vision gift. And it's possible, I think, well, I'm going to argue this. I'm going to argue that it's possible to give your talents and your service to God and not give your heart to God. It's possible to do great deeds for other people and not surrender your heart to Christ in faith and trust. Again, I realize if you're listening and maybe you come from a different faith tradition, that's like, well, okay, you're kind of pigeonholing me into saying that I have to believe in God. Well, that's between you and God. But I'm saying here, and what Paul is bringing up in this text is, love only happens in a transformational understanding of who God is. To be fully loved means my character will change because I don't have to impress anybody. More on that in a minute. So the difference between being gifted and having a heart that's filled with grace and trust is really like night and day. So it brings up some questions. First question, if that's true, why would God ever let his power work through people that don't believe in him? Well, I believe this, that God is kind and loving and desires to see people flourish. God uses people in spite of themselves. I think that happens a lot. And good comes from it. Question number 2, how is it possible for people to be incredible leaders and have very little grace in their own life, especially for others? Well, people mistake their talent for character. So we mistake our gifts and our achievements for character. Because we think, well, I'm doing this great thing, I must be a good person. Well, that's not always true. There's a lot of people that are jerks that are doing really, really cool things and leading a bunch of people, but nobody likes them. So in our society, we see people doing amazing things. We observe these incredible results, and we may assume that this person has a connection with God. So we continually mistake talent for character, and it's really the worst mistake we can possibly do. Here's some diagnostic questions for you, because again, it's about how we're developing character in ourselves, right? Ask yourself this, am I hiding behind the good things I am doing, my talents and abilities? Am I hiding behind those things? Underneath, am I joyless, feeling sorry for myself, cynical, angry, keeping a record of wrongs? Because it's so natural for us to mistake our talents for grace. So we got to really go there and really do these hard examination of ourselves and say, how am I living this life? How am I, if I'm following Christ, how is this being lived out? So brings me to my next point. Looking at that, and sometimes we mistake talent for character and gifts for character. Well, this really isn't also just about being good. We talk about that a lot too. Well, if you're a religious person, then you're a good person. Well, that's not true either. In verse 3, Paul gives a list. He likes to do this. And this is a list of moral and ethical behaviors. He says, if I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. So he says, if I give everything I have to the poor, this is having a social conscience, right? Here's a person willing to live a simple life, and this is what unites liberals and conservatives, that this takes the moral and ethical lists and treats them like talents. Here we go again. However, if we don't have character, we're still hollow. These lists can be done for one or two very different heart motives. I'm going to look at one. So it's possible to be incredibly virtuous, sacrificing my time, giving of my money, letting my life be about other people, and still be hollow, still be empty. I'm not as harsh as Paul saying I'm still nothing. How can that be? Well, how about this statement at the end of his list? Here it is. I gain nothing, even if I do all those things, but I don't have love, if I don't have character. You could die for somebody, you could give away your money, but if you don't have love, it really means nothing. And that seems so harsh. The example I gave here is giving, a tithe, donation, offering to a church or to anywhere, okay? So giving. It's one thing to give money out of worship and gratitude. God, thank you for what you've given me. I'm giving this back. It's another thing to give money out of guilt and pressure. Which one makes the heart glad? Giving out of gratitude or giving out of pressure? Which one is about God? And I'm also saying too, being manipulated by people. If you're being manipulated by people and giving out of guilt, well, maybe it's okay for you just to settle in and go, you know what, that's not right. I don't feel good about giving here. Awesome. That's called character. That's called giving out of love. So find a place where you do feel like you can give out of gratitude. Which one of those is about self and appeasing some weird notion of guilt? So that's kind of another litmus test on how we look at some of these things. So if we do good things to get a sense of worth, that's also a crummy motive. It doesn't enhance our character and it doesn't transform our heart. So we can't do God any favors. And if we think we can, that's demeaning and manipulative if you really think about it. God doesn't need me to do anything for him. I don't earn God's love, it's given to me. So I don't have to impress God. I don't have to hey, look at all these things. Man, you should love me. God just loves me. God just loves you, right where you're at. And I think that's something that we have to learn to bring into our heart. What's the common sense definition of love? To serve other people rather than myself. If the reason you are kind and generous to people and your motive for doing it is to count or matter or feel good, you're really making it about yourself. You're not really loving and giving and serving others out of a motive that's pure. It's possible to be loving without love. Think about that. How do we determine that? Well, how do you do a self-diagnostic to find out it's really about you and not about God or a person? I think the text tells us two things, if it's true and what degree it is true. This is not an either-or thing, and to some degree we all deal with this, no matter how generous, kind, successful, gifted. I think these two things will let us know. Verses 4 through 7 is another list, right? The love list. Love is patient, love is kind. Notice that it doesn't say love is forceful, love robs banks, and love kills. This is subtle. It's about character. It's about who you are in private. You can do all the right things, but at the end of the day, are you impatient, rude, self-seeking, harsh, vain, always getting your feelings hurt? People who know you in private can see it. So I asked Sue one time. Yeah, okay. Moving on. Verse 8, Paul says this. Love never fails. Love never fails. Real love really isn't based on me, and it doesn't fall apart. The way you know is when you're in a relationship with someone and you have all this feeling and love, and then maybe if you've ever had this situation, all of a sudden the relationship's over. If that relationship turns to hate and indifference, just like that, then really the need to be needed or be indispensable is gone, the love is gone, you've really made that relationship about you. Do not mistake being virtuous, committed, and kind for a truly changed heart by God. It's possible to do all of those things and not have love. Now you can see how the Corinthians weren't all aflutter when they read this, and I don't think we are either. So we know what it's not, so what is it? Well, it's really all about grace, the grace of God, this undeserved understanding that God's love is available to you and to me. So truly inner character comes in the way we approach God. And this might be challenging. You'll never be a loving person if you think love is a set of guidelines. Love is a living, acting power. It's transcendent. It desires to connect to your immanence. We will never be loving people trying to live up to the list in this text. It's brutally difficult to do, let alone be. Let me read it again to remind you. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I can't live that out on my own. I can't do that. I keep a record of wrongs. I'm not always kind, but that's what he's saying. Love is kind. It perseveres. It doesn't keep in mind something that somebody did to me 5 years ago. It's tough. So when we're angry, unforgiving, what do we need to do? If we can't live up to this list, what do we need to do? Well, there's an amazing example of the cross, Jesus on the cross, because that humbles us. How can I be proud when I need Jesus to rescue me? Because I can't do this myself. And it encourages me. How can I be so needy? And why do I care about what people think? Well, Jesus loves me so much, he thought I was so important that he died for me. He wanted me to know, and you to know, that you're loved beyond belief. You're so loved. Why does it matter what somebody thinks of you? You're loved by the creator of the universe. When you realize the love of God, it changes the way you see everything. And I mean everything. The way you live your life, handle your money, invest your time, think about your career, think about your loved one. If you're married, your spouse, if you have kids, your children, the way you treat your loves, it changes everything. Love never fails. So, what kind of person are you when it comes to love? What transformation needs to take place within you? How do you get a hold of it when you look to the cross? And I pray everybody listening that that's exactly what you do, because there's a world out there that needs this kind of love given. And we're coming into this election season, and things are going to start to get a little weird between people with different political views. Try love. Let's try that. Because love's always kind. It doesn't boast. It's not easily angered. It's not proud. Let's be people of love. We do that individually, we do that as a community, and we do that and we move into the world and bring that as an example. I'm going to pray. Jesus, thank you for an amazing example you've given us of love, that even from the cross you were loving people, you were forgiving people. As you walked the earth, Lord, you were an example of what it means to be with people that were different, had different political views, different religious views. And Lord, you extended love and grace and mercy. And Lord, help us do that. Each person listening, God, let there be this infusion of what it means to be a loving person. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. Please go to believedoubtseek.org, and you can find our updated calendar as we have everything through the rest of the year. I'm really excited about our in-person Christmas Eve gathering on the 24th. We also have some other things coming up that please pay attention to that. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, you can do that at our website as well. If you haven't had an opportunity to give, you can do that as well on our website. Thank you for being with us. Have a great rest of your day.